That was great. What a great introduction. I love to hear the things that made an impression on somebody like one of my new teachers, Jeremy. So I have written a paper this week, and the paper will be published, and you can read the paper. I'm not going to read the paper to you, but I will tell you some stories. And I'll tell you an idea I have, and you can tell me if it's worth worrying about. The first story I'll tell you starts here in Little Rock. In 1992, I was working for the Center for Community Change, a national nonprofit that supports community groups and social justice organizations. And a friend of mine knew somebody who knew somebody, and the call came out from the transition team for the newly elected President Bill Clinton. That they wanted to know what neighborhood organizations, community groups, grassroots groups, African-American communities, communities of color, and organizers, what we thought they should do. The transition team invited us, and we organized a roundtable called the Neighborhood Roundtable. We were here in December for the meeting, 50 people from all over the country, young people, organizers, activists. We were linked to an arts meeting, so there were museum directors. And we answered the question, what do we think you should do? Our simple recommendations were that President Clinton should articulate a vision of America as community and recognize that need to come together to rebuild those communities where they're threatened. That President Clinton should adopt a comprehensive, community-based strategy to rebuild those communities from the bottom up. And that the President should recognize in policy and in the rhetoric of the new administration the key role of community-based organizations in carrying out that strategy. Now, this made a lot of sense to us at the time, and I'm very proud that we were able to boil down 150 pages of deliberation to 3 simple recommendations. Each recommendation was summarized, backed up by a brief paper. The records of it are across the street in the archive because we stood at the copy machine and made copies of it. And we listed priorities for each department. We had very specific recommendations, but these were our simple recommendations. That vision of America as community, the need to rebuild that community from the bottom up, and the key role that community organizations can play, that vision still lives today. And that's really what community philanthropy is. So I'm excited to come full circle back to Little Rock. Community philanthropy requires giving. You have to have money. You have to have ideas. You have to have the passion and participation of people. And I'd like to explore with you a little bit some of the column rules, some of the experiences, some of the wisdom that I've learned from others about what motivates people to give, their money and their time. What are the obstacles? What are the factors that can increase the likelihood that individuals and organizations will give you what you need to do what needs to be done? I want to focus, although there's a wonderful science to the science of individual giving and recruitment and enlistment, I want to focus on institutional giving and organizations, community-based organizations, grassroots groups, activist groups in the progressive arena who are trying to work together for change and trying to get money and trying to get people to join them. So I want to focus on that piece of this question of giving. And I want to say, unfortunately, and I've been on both sides of the begging bowl, I've been a grant seeker and a grant maker, it is inherently an unequal relationship. The people with the money think they're smarter. They aren't always, sometimes they are. They think they're smarter, they think the privilege that comes with sitting on top of a big pile of money is it's a soul endangering thing. And the requirement to listen to people who you want to help, which I think is important across the board in life, we should listen to those to whom we want to be helpful, is very difficult to bring into the philanthropic sphere. It's hard as a donor, as a funder, to treat the grant seeker as an equal. But I believe that tools that can help us equalize the power and the idea of power, the sense of power between the grant seeker and the grant giver. Those tools are helpful to both the givers and the getters. I believe, in general, people give more out of opportunity than out of need. I think it's tempting to say, oh, woe is us. We're almost about to close our doors. We need your money now. We're pitiful and sad and things are really hard, and look at the sad children. And that tugs at our heartstrings, but I don't think that truly engages us as much and as compellingly as the narrative of opportunity. We are going to do it. We can actually win. We're big enough to achieve what we want. And with your help, we can get there. And I think that narrative of power, that narrative of sufficiency, that narrative of opportunity is a much more powerful than the narrative of need. So I'd like to explore a little bit how we add into the philanthropic relationship, the foundation relationship, the proposal writing and proposal giving relationship, how we equalize the power and how we change it from a dialogue of need to a dialogue of opportunity, from a dialogue of weakness that says we, the poor, sad organization, need money in order to just get by and maybe make a difference, to a narrative that says we're just about there, we're big, we're bad, we're almost successful. If only you could join us, we could do something important together. One of the least useful tools for the narrative of sufficiency, for the story of strength rather than the story of weakness, is the proposal. Many organizations that give money away ask for a proposal focusing on a project, as if you could do a project without an organization, as if you could do a project without understanding the context that project is in, and as if you could do a project in a place, in an organization that wasn't embedded in a larger field. And that's the word I'm going to use a lot today, the larger field. The proposal form requires us to focus on a tiny piece of the true story of community philanthropy, of the true story of the strength of the movement for change and the power that a project is embedded in. The proposal form requires us to focus on the smallest piece of the puzzle when in fact the whole puzzle exists. So I want to ask how we can change the way we ask our question, what is your proposal, what is your story, or we answer the question, what are you proposing to do? And I'm proposing a field map. I'm going to suggest that we need, as fund seekers and fund givers, to see the whole field at the same time. If you play basketball or lacrosse or any of those field sports, you know the truly great players will watch the ball come towards them, but they know who's over there and where they came from and where they're going. They have the ability to see the whole court at the same time. And I think the truly great change makers in community philanthropy, both fund givers and fund seekers, can see the whole field at the same time. And I'm proposing a framework for a tool that can help us with that. The project is the tiny piece of the puzzle. How do we describe the whole puzzle and give the real context? Now, somebody asked me in the course of this week, are you talking about alignment and coalition building? Sort of, but not really. I think, yes, it's good to have, to go recruit friends, but I think it's also just absolutely true that every project is embedded in a field. And if we don't understand the field that that project is embedded in, we can't really judge it. So this is a way to describe reality. A project is generally, for most organizations, the thing you're writing a proposal to do, not your whole organization or your strategy or your whole idea, but a simple project. But I believe that the organization and understanding the organization the project is embedded in is really critical. The network, our network, who are we? So it's important to tell the story of what is really true about the project, what is the organization it's embedded in, but also what are the formal relationships that this organization has that you need to understand in order to understand this organization. Are you a local chapter of a national group? Are you a local affiliate of a statewide network? Are you in a formal organization that provides for you support, that may provide training, consultation, common issue work? Telling the story of that helps you to understand the possibilities of success and the true size of a community project. And then, even to go to another level, I ask organizations this all the time: who's us? When you say we're going to do this or we're going to do that, who's us? Well, of course, it's us, our state chapter director, and you know, we don't do anything without talking to Robert, because Robert's our guy. Even though he is not an official consultant, you know, he's our former board chair, and he's always, so if you can't understand us without understanding that Robert's in the mix. So who are the informal but consistent thought partners and action partners that an organization and a project are embedded in? That's really important to understand the true nature of a project or a proposal. So this is from the point of view of the project or the grant seeker. From the point of view of the grant maker, which, if you've never done this, just sit back and imagine what it would be like to give away $1.5 million a year. Now that's a tiny little foundation. I ran a foundation called the Need More Fund, and people said, oh, don't you hate saying no to all those people because you get 150 proposals and you can only give 60 grants a year? I said, no, I get to call people up and say, you're going to get 30,000 bucks. And they treat me really nice. So it is a wonderful privilege, and I believe a sole danger to be in charge of giving money away, because you are constrained by the limitations of the amount of money you have to give away. There are always more ideas than you can support, and you're constrained by the vision of those who set up the fund. So you may see that it's necessary to do something that your donors or your board or your managers don't get. So I'm looking now to give tools to the fund givers to understand and to translate to their stakeholders, seeing the whole field at once, seeing the true nature of power. So the project analogy in a foundation or a fund giving organization is the grant, a single grant. It's the individual project, and it's a modest amount. No matter how big the foundation is, it's compared to your total assets or your total grant making, a single grant is a thing. The grantees, the whole docket is what we refer to that as, the whole docket, the whole group of groups that we give money to, is rarely understood beyond the bottom line. We give away X number of dollars a year. And I'm proposing to help fund givers understand the whole field they're giving into, rather than just the single organization. And I'll talk about this by example in a few minutes. But again, a reality which we don't have a way to reflect in our normal organizational process as a fund giver is, what is the field into which I'm funding? I believe it's impossible to understand the strength of the docket and the possibilities of success of the docket unless you see the whole field. And that means seeing the organizations that the projects and your grants are embedded in, and the networks that those organizations are a part of. So that's our challenge, the formal and informal. Let me take an example. With their permission, the Gamaliel Foundation, I won't spell it for you, it's from the Bible. It's a grassroots, faith-based, institution-based community organizing network, a national network. In the example, I'll start with one of their local projects, the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, based in Pittsburgh, They have a budget of $477,000. So it's as nonprofits, as community organizing groups go, it's pretty big. It's statewide in vision, has a Pittsburgh headquarters. The network as a whole is made up of independent nonprofits that are affiliated with the Gamaliel Foundation, and they vary in size between 83,000 and 760,000. So what I would think of as small to medium size nonprofits. And they're all over the country in 18 states. And then they have a national organization with a national campaign on transportation equity. And that's about a $2 million operation. So a proposal that we would get from anywhere in this network would come from, for example, the Pittsburgh-based project, maybe for the Pennsylvania organization. And maybe you would figure out that they were part of the larger network. That's the picture if you were just looking at Pennsylvania, just looking at the one applicant organization. But to understand them, you have to understand that the Gamaliel Foundation, if you thought of it as a single capacity, not as a loose network of separate pieces, but as a whole puzzle, they have an annual budget combined together of $5.4 million. Now, the difference between a $500,000 budget organization and a $5 million organization is you can imagine they could do something really important. So seeing the whole network at one time makes you take them more seriously, I believe. Seeing the Pennsylvania group as supported by a series of sister organizations, as embedded in a network of support, training, and really a way to express their power nationally, is a much larger context. And in fact, one of the most important things to know about the Gamaliel Foundation is that $5.3 million puzzle includes grassroots fundraising, money from dues, from membership, and these are organizations based in churches, and they're middle class and working class and people with less money than that. That network raises $2,375,000 a year from internal sources. Why do I love that number so much? Because the conversation between Pittsburgh and the Ford Foundation is a conversation of the Big Ford and Little Pittsburgh. Conversation between Big Ford Foundation and the Gamaliel Network, it's a little more serious, a little more equal. But if you think about Ford as a grant-making institution, they're going to make maybe a $500,000 a year commitment. So you need to take them seriously. People are nice to foundations. People are nice. They laugh at our jokes. They tell us we're thin and looking younger than ever. But if your Ford Foundation, the stakes are about $500,000, but if you walk in knowing you get $2.5 million from your members, you're more than an equal in power with the Ford Foundation. And that, I believe, makes for a better quality conversation. What can we do together? We need you, but we don't need you that much. So now let's have a conversation, let's talk. And I think that's, to me, I call this in my paper, if you were negotiating with a McGiant fund, you would be negotiating, I think, as an equal rather than as a supplicant. And I believe that's more dramatic. I'll give you another example. You won't be surprised to hear that it's the Need More Fund, where I used to be the executive director. Now, I don't have access to the books, and I asked their permission, and they gave me the data on last year's grant making. With their permission and Robert's help as my data battler, he struggled this data to the ground and choked it into submission, and now it seems to make sense. It actually wasn't that hard, but he was great. So the Need More Fund, as I said, makes grants, made 44 grants last year. And the average grant amount was $33,000. Now, for most of these organizations, that's a serious, this is for operating support, not for project support. So it's flexible money. We give it all at once. Groups are glad to have it. They're nice to us. But $33,000 is not that much if you're trying to run a big fighting organization with a $2 million budget It's great to have, but it's not that big a deal. And the Need More Fund is very aware that we're a small organization. We have a capital of about $25 million. Again, that seemed like a lot of money to me, but I've been in rooms of people who give away $25 million a year, not who have a capital of $25 million, but whose annual giving is that much. And you know, we are aware that we're limited in our scope and power. And sometimes the donor family and those on the board ask a question, what can we really do with such a little bit of money? Well, if you look at the foundation as giving away $1.5 million a year, it's okay, it's nice, it's great, it's money, but it's not a lot. But after we did the numbers and seeing the field as a field rather than a fragmented puzzle, the total budget of the organizations we give to was $26.8 million. All of a sudden, we're not a $1.5 million foundation. We're in relationship with organizations that are trying to make a difference in this country whose total budgets are $26 million. Different scale, different scope. The feeling of power is starting to grow inside me, even as I say that. Even more importantly, and we always think about this, we always talk about this, and in the Need More Fund, it's very important to us that communities that are getting organized have a dollar on the table. They have what is the term? Skin in the game. The poorest communities can raise some money. And many of the organizations we fund work hard to get membership dues, to get grassroots funding. But we're talking about poor communities, we're talking about working communities, so it's tough. In that field of $26.8 million, those organizations raise $8 million from their own members, from their own communities, from their own sources. They are not beholden to the philanthropic aristocracy. You could have a conversation with, you would like to join us, but we're going ahead. We have power, we have an initiative, we have control, we have authority, we have power, and we'd like you to join us. I think that's an attractive proposition. And to think about the field that Need More Funds into. Now, many of them are institutional organizations, so a local organization may have 20 church members. So those institutional memberships are a big number to me. Well, the big number of the whole network is there are 1,100 churches, labor unions, and community groups that are part of the network that Need More Funds into. 1,100, that seems like we might actually be able to do something. There are 49,000 individual members, people who have signed up, paid their dues, and vote on the board of that organization. So all of a sudden, we're not a tiny little foundation trying our valiant best to make a difference by shoveling against the tide, but it feels more powerful. We can be proud as Need More that we are contributing along with community people who are getting organized on their own behalf, not on behalf of. And I think that's a more honest and a more powerful conversation. There's another set of thought processes here, which I'm proud to have been a part of, to think about a region or a place. And I would suggest as you become fund seekers or fund givers, you think about how to tell the story of the whole field about your place. The National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy has done a series of studies. I don't have a slide on this, but I'll wave my arms and you pretend you see the picture. We did a series of studies where we looked at places, regions, in some cases a single state, in some cases a northwest, southeast. And we asked the question, what is the sector of advocacy and organizing cost, and what does it deliver? Over a period of time, in a scientific study, we looked at this question. We call it the return on investment question. In return for a philanthropic investment, not in a single project, but in a sector and in a place, what came back? And the average of now 7 studies across the country was for $1 of philanthropic investment in advocacy and organizing, $155 is returned in actual, tangible benefit to people's lives. Now, I love this number, and I think it's another way to flip the script away from pity us, we are sad and we are hungry. Look in our eyes of our children, they are pitiful. to a proposition that is a value proposition that says we're strong, we're powerful, we can do it, we can make a difference. If you will add your money, we will add our people and our money, and we can actually accomplish something. I think that's a more compelling, a more interesting, a more dignified, and a more American, if you'll excuse my patriotism, proposition. Seeing the whole field. This is put the two Presidents Clinton on the screen to end up. Did I say it out loud? Seeing the whole field, telling the story of strength rather than just the story of need, I think is more attractive. I think is more powerful. I think brings money and leaders and allies and others into the conversation. People will give if they believe their gift will make a difference. Together, with this view, I believe we can step up to that challenge that was articulated in 1992, that we can understand America as community, that we can recognize those communities are distressed, that we can recognize the strategy to repair that success requires a bottom-up approach, and that community organizations are a critical part of that. And I thank you for being a part of it. I invite you to be a more powerful part of it, and I thank you for the week here in Little Rock. Now I understand you're going to tell jokes. Isn't that right, Bob? Questions? Observations?
This time we'll take a little questions and answers for.
My daddy's a Baptist preacher, and in church I noticed when I was growing up that the only clock in the whole church was on the front edge of the balcony. And I said, Dad, why did they put it there? We can't see what time it is. He said, no, you don't have to see what time it is. I need to see what time it is, so I know when it's time to be quiet. But I'll get my watch out. So that, who's got a question, an observation, something to challenge, a mistake I made? Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Marisa Nelson. I'm a student here at the Clinton School. Thank
Great.
you so
Where are you
much for
from?
being here today. I'm from Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Arkansas, Fort Smith, yeah.
I work with a community organization, and I know I'm very interested in seeking a way to connect the disparate efforts that happen within my field, and I know organizations are as well, but it's very easy to get so stuck on what your projects are,
Yep.
and with very limited time and resources, reaching out to other people can be hard. So what kind of tools or ideas do you have so that people aren't duplicating efforts or working against each other instead of with each other?
Well, there's three things I would suggest. One is the funders and those stakeholders, the funders can drive, unwittingly, can drive a negative agenda. I would say it's important to figure out the power analysis of what you're doing, who's important, who's setting the agenda, who's setting the direction, and engage those people seriously in the question of how to support collaboration and, I won't say punish competition or negative silos, but how to at least support cooperation. I believe, so one is enlist the powerful characters in the funding scene in an honest, straightforward conversation, asking them to take positive action steps to improve, to support, and to make opportunities for collaboration. Second, just do things together. I can't tell you the value of the weekly potluck supper for everybody who's on our side of every issue. There's no membership card, there's no public relations problem, there's not even a title, but it's the Friday night group. And it's a chance for you and me, just after we finished competing for money from the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, we cut each other's throats, we talked about each other like dogs, but at least we can eat barbecue together. And maybe next time we can put in a joint proposal. Now, it doesn't guarantee it, but I can't tell you the number of times, it's not a program, it's not expensive, you don't need, I'm sorry, You don't need Robert's permission, the Pruitt Foundation. It's the secret million. It's kind of the Batman situation where he's got that, the millions of dollars. You don't need his money to tell you can talk to each other. Just talk to each other. And the power of the Friday night potluck is just magnificent. And the third thing I would say is figure out a project which is not big, expensive, or high risk, but a project to do together. That's one step beyond Friday night supper. But if you can say to the power people, the Kellogg Foundation or the Pruitt Foundation or somebody who could say, I got to make one big grant into Arkansas, but I can make a mini grant for travel to the training program in California, and instead of making 3 grants to 3 groups, I can make 1 grant if you can all get together and say who wants to go, what you want to do, what you're going to do. So that's $9,000 instead of $900,000. So do a small formal project. And then I said there were 3 things. This is going to be number 4. Debrief all those other things. How's that going? How did we do? What did we learn from that? What a failure and disaster that Friday night supper thing was, because we had the vegetarians fighting with the meat people, who wanted to go to church because it was Ramadan. I mean, we're never doing that again, because, we had a pork festival and the Jews got mad and the Muslims got mad. No. So debrief it. Talk about it and learn the positive lessons of what works. And also, I love learning from other people's mistakes. So anyway, and then there will be unicorns and rainbows. What else? Yep.
Hi, I'm Hunter Mullins. I'm also from Arkansas, so I hope that
Good.
isn't disappointing. I'm a Class 9 student here at the Clinton School.
Great.
I was curious what kind of pushback, if any, you've gotten on this kind of analysis. So.
Well, one of the reasons I'm excited about it as a tool is I've seen when people have used something like this, they've liked it. So at the Niebuhr Fund, in the course of my 10 years there, we were frustrated because we were reading proposals, and some of them were really clear and told the story of how their work fit into the politics and economics and the moment of their community, of their region, and of the country. Why is this important? But others didn't tell that story so well. So it took us a couple of years, but we figured out we should ask the question. So we have added a question to our form, which said, please describe the political, economic, and social context in which you're working and how it fits with your strategy. And we got number one, we got an answer to that question from everybody. And again, I think groups started to sort themselves out to people who really did understand why they were doing what they were doing and what their context was. And not just that people gave the wrong answer, but they didn't give a clear answer. So it showed us something about it. And we found the application to be a much more useful thing when we added that question. I think with that experience, and from other people I know in other foundations that fund social justice work and community work, I believe if there was a common set of questions, there would come to be a broader utilization of those answers. And so that's, I'm not very far along in the process of trying to get this adopted as a standard practice, but I'm hopeful because I think it's, people already see the value when they can get this question answered. Thanks, though.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Meineke from the Arkansas Nonprofit Alliance.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm going to ask you later if you know anybody in Toledo with your same last name, because I know a bunch of people in Toledo
Well, then let's talk.
who are Meinekes.
Very odd last name. Anyway, what you had, the concept that you gave today was really helped give me a frame to think about things differently. And also,
You can say that again. I love that kind of stuff. Did it really, though?
yeah, I'd like to say that we have very visionary foundation leaders in our state.
Yeah, okay.
and partners, truly.
Yeah.
We have sort of come to the same conclusion amongst a lot of different partners that this is the direction that we want to go.
Yeah.
And we are actually doing the things that you're doing. I see it's going to be a very long time to
Sure.
really get that to gel. But it also strikes me that these concepts can be used for other than grant makers and grant seekers in that, you know, one of the things it seems to me is if you are, the network, the components of the network itself, the members, the
Yeah.
organizations also need to know that
Oh,
by
absolutely.
joining in with this, they're adding their power.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for them to join in, other than just the benefits they receive from a membership network.
Yeah,
And also in terms of advocacy, you know.
Absolutely.
So those diagrams with the, you know, adding up those
Yeah.
that data was very helpful,
Yeah.
so.
And I meant to be clear about that at the beginning, that I think this is a useful tool for anybody you're asking to give into community philanthropy. You're asking neighborhood people to join. Don't join us because things are so bad and we're so pitiful. Join us because we can do something, and your participation can make a difference. And not to bring us from failure to survival, but to bring us from survival to success. I think it's a very, very powerful tool. Yes.
My name is Jason Polmeyer. I'm the principal of a small Catholic school just a few blocks away from here called
cool.
St. Edward. And correct me, did I understand right? You said the Need More Foundation did fund things for operations?
Yes.
So, do you see a difference in how you make this appeal for operational versus a new project? And do you have any recommendations on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was such a blessing to work for the Need More Fund, which had already a culture of giving operating support. Sharice West and I are both great supporters of the National Center for Responsive Philanthropy, which has developed a set of criteria for philanthropy at its best. And one of those criteria says that operating support is a much more powerful intervention in a community than project support, because every project is embedded in an organization, and every organization needs operations. So I believe in it. I also believe that even if the foundation is only asking a question about a project, you know, we'd like to support reading teachers in your school, they need to know about the physical plant, about the spiritual development that happens there, about the infrastructure, about the theory of education, and whether you are one of the charter semi-Catholic schools or a diocesan school, or whether you're a member of the National Association of Crazy School People Who Do Stupid Things, or the National Association of Smart School People Who are really good. And that understanding the context, even if they're only funding the project, is a better way of making decisions. So I'd love to see everybody convert to operating support, but I think it's useful otherwise too. The National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, NCRP, and the concept is called, there's a publication and an annual review of the field called Philanthropy at its Best. Their board chair, smart, strong, intelligent, young, from Arkansas, runs something called the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. Sharice West is the board chair of NCRP, and obviously, as you all know, I hope, a very important national leader in the field of philanthropy. The people with the mics have all the power. I'll point at people, but it means nothing.
I don't know if there are any other questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. I actually don't have a question. Since you came to our class, to Dr. Williams' class, you gave us so much information, and then the one-on-one interviews, and then today, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming out and spending time with us. And then also, you didn't mention in your slideshow, but the materials that you gave us in the Green Book, the 10...
Isn't that fun?
That was so much fun and helpful, so I just wanted to put that out to everyone else.
I'll tell everybody what the Green Book is.
Okay.
It's, a long time ago, I started at the University of Toledo Urban Affairs Center and did a series of workshops on community organizing, like 6 workshop series. One week was about this, the next week was about that. And I'd done a lot of training before that, but I had to develop write the curriculum and write a little note to go with it. And by the end of the series, I realized I'd written everything I think about organizing. So I put it all together and added some semicolons and wrapped it all up together. And you know, there's a couple of different tricks I used. Like, I printed it all on one side of the paper, and it was comb bound the first time, so you could pull the thing out and put it on a copy machine and copy it real fast. I left a lot of white space, you know, in the original publication. Moses taught all of us 10 rules. You gotta have 10 something, 10, there weren't commandments, the 10 rules of community organizing. So I had 10 rules, and people like that. It's a simple framework. So I had 60 of these for the first set of workshops, and then I printed another 1,000, and those were gone pretty fast. Well, by now, I think it was 1991 when I started with it, by now it has been physically copied and distributed, at least 25,000 copies. It's online in a very important and valuable website called COMM.org, COMM-ORG, and it's .wisc.edu. It's the University of Wisconsin. COMM.org, which has papers and resources and references relating to the field of community organizing. They've published this paper. And I do a lot of work with a series of groups in Eastern Europe, the European Community Organizing Network. And this thing, this little, I call it the Green Book because it always had a green cover. It has been translated into Moldovan, Romanian, Polish, Slovak, Russian. It's weird to see your words in, you know, the 10 rules in Slovak, but yeah.
Hi, my name is Michael Brewery, and
Mike.
I work with the state, getting to do some nonprofit consulting.
Cool.
And the question that I'm really interested about is, you talk about painting this picture.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the colors that we can paint with, it's sort of the data. What are some of the principles in terms of transparency for foundations, and namely smaller foundations,
Sure.
that they should be striving for to help give the sector as a whole a better understanding of the bigger picture?
First thing I'd say, thank you, that's a great question. And you're not talking about transparency from the point of view of the grant seeker, but from the point of view of the grant maker, right? Because I think both are important, but I think there is a whole section of Philanthropy at its Best that talks about what best practices in terms of transparency and information sharing foundations should do. I would refer you to that, certainly. But I think if a funder can't answer the question about the field into which they're funding, they're missing a boat. And that's why I hope to be able to offer a simple way to ask and answer those questions. You can analyze, Robert, I'm sure, would do workshops for people if they wanted to know how to analyze their grant docket, because he's done the Need More Fund. You can analyze your docket based on this as long as you ask the basic half dozen questions. It's not hard. I'm not sure I'm getting to what the rub of your question is, but I think the information is either already out there or easily collectible to understand the full field of either a donor or a grant seeker, either. And I think the information is easily collected. One of the things that I talk about a little bit in the paper that I'm sure is going to be part of the follow-up to this, if it takes a life of its own in the real world, is some common definitions. For example, the Need More Fund is really clear that one of the things we fund grassroots organizations with a membership, and the membership is tied to the governance. So the board has got to be elected from the grassroots membership that reflects the community that's being organized. Now, we see proposals from people that say, well, we're the Vermont People's Action Organization, and we have a mailing list of 60,000 people. Well, that's very interesting. But do they vote on your board? Do you tell them what you're going to do and help and let them decide? And are you trying to end homelessness, but your members are all rich people? That's maybe a smart strategy, but it's not what we fund. So common definitions of things like membership, it would be important to establish, and that would take some conversations and some roundtables and some refining the tool. And that is important. And I think that conversation and setting up that clarity around language, around these questions about seeing the whole field, would add to the understanding of the sector on both sides of the begging bowl, too. Thanks. Yep.
I'm Scott Stewart. I'm an investment advisor who tries to help nonprofits get and stay financially strong, and I'd like you to comment
Great.
on how they could be better negotiators, negotiate more from a position of strength
Yeah.
if they would establish a cash reserve and an endowment and other wise money management practices.
Well, let me put it this way, Scott. I think it's probably you can look at the question you're asking in two different ways. If people only felt stronger, they would think it was important to have an investment strategy. But they don't think of themselves as the kind of people that need an investment strategy. So I think part of it is to change the self-image of organizations. A friend of mine, actually the guy who runs the ComOrg website, when he first came to Toledo, said, I'd like to get to know people in the community and I'd like your help, and introduced me. I said, let's do something together that would be helpful. And so he did an assessment, which allowed him to go around and talk to everybody, introduce himself, and I gave him the kind of tell him Dave sent you thing. And his report started off with saying, the field of community-based development and organizing in Toledo, Ohio is $1 million field. Now, what that meant is there were 67 organizations, 40 of which had a budget of $46.50, and there were some that were bigger and there were a few that were larger. But by saying, even by framing it to say, we are $1 million part of the Toledo political and economic scene, different self-image. Are you worthy of having an investment strategy? Are you someday going to get to the point where you have an endowment? And I think that's an attitude thing. And part of I think, the beauty of this framework, seeing the whole field, is if you present yourself as a project in East Dubuque, Arkansas, struggling to figure out how to keep the lights on, you're presenting yourself as a needy, weak organization. But if you present yourself as part of the Arkansas network to fix the mess, and an integral part of an actual network, and we are a $4 million plan, and we have a $5 million five-year plan, and we have sisters and partner organizations that add up to a full field of $27 million, we're a piece of that puzzle. Now, first of all, it's got to be true, but if you imagine yourself like that, I think it's a different conversation about money. I will say another thing about this, and I think a couple of us in our one-on-ones talked about this. What do you think you're doing when you're raising money? I'm asking people to give me money. Okay, that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, you have a need. You want to change the world. You want to make the world a better place. You want to feel safe. You want your kids to have a possibility of the future. You want to not be disrespected. You want to be proud of being American. You have a need. I can help you fill that need. I have something you need, and that is an organization that can be successful in help us to meet our needs. So if you give me money, you're not meeting my need. I'm meeting your need. Now, you don't use that in an arrogant way. You don't say, I don't know if I'm going to allow you to give me money, but we'll see. I say that, but now I'm going to take it back, because I have suggested to organizations and groups of organizations that they issue a request for proposals from foundations to see whether or not they're qualified to give us money. Imagine, just imagine, if all the organizations in Arkansas said to all those funders from the various cereal places and car places, and not naming any names, if you said, here's our criteria for people we'll accept money from. We won't take money from anybody who doesn't have a local presence. If you're going to fly in, fly out, life's too short. We're not going to deal with you anymore. You're welcome to make grants, but you're not eligible to give money to our collaborative effort. We're not going to give money to anybody who's going to give less than a 2-year commitment, because anything you want to do that's important is not possible to do by the time of the second quarter. So the criteria for honest, honorable giving into Arkansas is at least a 2-year commitment. And we want to see at least half your grant money go for operating support, not projects, and for capacity building and operating support, because that's a need we've identified. We've agreed you're not a qualified funder if you don't see the need for capacity building. Hire some consultants from the Clinton School to help people strengthen their organizations. That's right, that's important. Not even be messing around, giving people money and letting them fail. So what are you doing when you're asking for money? You're giving people an opportunity to have their need met. Anyway, I'm not sure that helps you sell people on endowments, but you want to follow up on that?
Let's see. Let me know if you, in your mind, address this. From what I've read, and of course I have a bias because I'm the guy who would be helping them set up these funds, but from what I've read, they can come to funding organizations, grant makers, and say, we have an endowment, we have a cash reserve, and suddenly their esteem rises in the eyes of those people.
It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell because sometimes it's not true. I know there are funders who will look at your books and will see a positive cash balance at the end of the year and say, you don't need my money. That's the problem. It's stupid, but don't let it get outside this room. And I know this is being taped, but I know you can edit it later. There are stupid grant makers out there that don't understand the value of positive cash balance. And I think that's important for funders to take responsibility for educating one another about the value of, and this comes back to the first question, what do you do about competition? The value of collaboration, the value of capacity building, and if you were to create a set of best policies, best principles, best practices that the funders would adopt that said, we value proper financial planning and we pledge to reward good financial management. And what that means is if you have a positive cash balance at the end of the year and can explain it as a reserve with a purpose, not just, gee, we didn't know we had any money left. Yeah. So that's one of those conversations that if you had like a nonprofit association and a grant makers group, I don't know if you do, but that might be an interesting conversation. Philanthropy at its best, Arkansas.
All right, let's give our scholar a round of applause.